أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه وأدخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. Today, inshallah, we'll touch upon some of the themes from Surah Al-Ahzab, that's chapter 33, the Confederates. Now, last week we talked about Surah Al-Sajda and the prostration, and the main theme of Surah Al-Sajda was the importance of submitting completely to Allah. So Surah Al-Ahzab and the 5 surahs after it, they all talk about a different type of submission that Allah wants us to do. So Surah Al-Ahzab is talking about surrender in tough situations. Surah Saba 34, surrender is the way to preserve civilizations. Surah Fatir, surrender as the only way to honor and dignity. Surah Yasin, insisting on da'wah even if it looks hopeless. Surah Safat, surrender even if you don't understand. And Surah Sad, surrender by going back to the truth without stubbornness. So these are all different modes of submission that Allah wants from us. So today we'll talk about Surah Al-Ahzab, which is surrender in tough situations. Now Surah Al-Ahzab instructs man to trust in Allah and surrender no matter how difficult the situation is. Because some people theoretically think, yes, I will follow the teachings of Allah, but when things get tough, they change their mind, they start waffling, they start, disobeying Allah to adjust to the situation. Allah says, no, submit. No matter how difficult it is, just submit, and Allah will make it easy. So when we look at the verses, verse 1, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها النبي اتق الله ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين إن الله كان عليما حكيما. O Prophet, fear Allah and do not obey the disbelievers and the hypocrites. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and wise. Now, the surah says, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu ittaqillah, like the Prophet. The Prophet was the most person who had taqwa of Allah. We're the ones who are addressed in the surah, not just the Prophet. Allah is addressing the believers through the Prophet that says, fear Allah. Fear Allah, and the second verse, وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. And follow that which is revealed to you from your Lord. Indeed, Allah is ever with what you do acquainted. So obedience and complete surrender to Allah and His commands are required from the believers, no matter how difficult the situation may be, because Allah is Alim and Hakim, and Allah is Khabir with everything that we do. So the first test in the surah is talk about the battle of the Maut, Ghazwat al-Khandaq, which is Al-Ahzab. The name of the surah it's talking about the Confederates. So the mushrikeen of Quraysh wanted to annihilate the Muslims from the face of the earth. So they gathered from all the tribes of Arabia. They had 10,000, the Confederates, that's what the Ahzab, the name of the surah. They assembled an army of 10,000 people, and that was the biggest army to date in that region. They didn't go to just defeat the Muslims. They went to wipe them out completely and get done with this problem that they perceived. So the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were in Medina. So they dug a moat around one of the sides of Medina, and they had mountains. So they were covered. And but what happened is, that was a very tough situation, because they did not have the army, they did not have the equipment to fight 10,000 soldiers. So they dug that moat and they were trying to hold them off, and then the Jews in Medina broke the treaty. So they were hoping that the Jews were covering the back. So now they were exposed from all sides, and things were very desperate it was a very tough situation. They were so afraid that some people were afraid to say, that's when Allah tested the believers and separated the hypocrites from the believers, because some of them says, your friend, meaning the Prophet, is promising us the kingdom of Kisra, of the Persians and the Romans, and we don't even feel safe going to the bathroom. What kind of a promise is your Lord and this person is telling us? They were shaken. They did not have the right faith to begin with, and when things got tough, they fell apart. And Allah described it in verse 10 and 11. إذ جاءوكم من فوقكم ومن أسفل منكم وإذ زاغت الأبصار وبلغت القلوب الحناجر وتظنون بالله الظنون. Remember when they came to you from above you and from below you, and when eyes shifted in fear and hearts reached the throats. That means intense fear. And you assumed about Allah various assumptions. In verse 11, Allah says, هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. There, the believers were tested and shaken with a severe shaking. It was an earthquake. It was like an earthquake. They were so afraid that they were going to get annihilated. But they had trust in Allah. They had the Prophet with them, and they had the promise of Allah of support and victory. So all they had to do is do their best. Now, this took about 2 months. 1 month, when they got the news that the army was heading to them, it took them 1 month to try to prepare that, like a big moat, to prevent the horses from crossing over. And then the siege took another month. So that whole month, they did not have a lot of food. They were afraid that they were going to attack them, and it was very cold, very cold at night, and it was very tough situation. But Allah described the believers. ولما رأى المؤمنون الأحزاب قالوا هذا ما وعدنا الله ورسوله وصدق الله ورسوله وما زادهم إلا إيمانا وتسليما. And when the believers saw the companies, all the armies coming in, they said, this is what Allah and His Messenger had promised us. And Allah and His Messenger spoke the truth, and it increased them only in faith and acceptance. They did not care how many people were out there to get them. They did not care if they die. They surrendered completely to Allah. And all they can do is do their best and put their trust in Allah. And they surrendered completely. When they did that, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala sent armies that they did not see. He sent fear on the mushrikeen. He sent very cold wind that pulled all their tents and all their very strong wind, and send angels. And the believers won without fighting, without a single fight. But when did they win? They won when they surrendered. And Allah, that's why the name of the surah is Al-Ahzab, is to keep in our mind that have trust in Allah no matter how the situation look bleak, no matter how it looks like everything is for naught. Have faith in Allah. Allah is able to give victory to the believers, but you have to demonstrate that you surrender completely, and Allah will help you. So the surah talks about other tough tests. One of them was talking about the Prophet's wives, when they burdened the Prophet with so many requests. They wanted from the things of this life, and that hurt the Prophet. And Allah in the Quran said, tell your wives, if you want this life, we'll give you this life, but you will be divorced. But if you want Allah and His Prophet, then you will have a great reward. So that was a very, very tough test for the mothers of the believers. Do you want the best of this life, or do you want the akhirah? Because the wives of the Prophet, the Prophet has a message. You cannot have your wives behaving like everyone else's wife and running after worldly things. That is not proper for the message. And the Prophet ﷺ did not care about this life. He was passing by. He was focusing on the hereafter. And if his wives did not want to take the same message, then the option was given for them. If you want this life, then you'll be set on your way. But they chose to surrender and to follow the Prophet and choose what Allah has in the hereafter. Another tough test in that surah was abrogating adoption. It was a habit in the Jahiliyyah that you can take anyone and claim he's your son, and then he'll inherit you and he becomes part of your family. But Allah says no, that you have to preserve the bloodline. If you can have somebody that you take care of, but you cannot have an adopted, you can adopt somebody and take care of them, but they maintain their family name, they maintain their relation to their family to preserve that bloodline. Otherwise, you can have brothers and sisters getting married and everything will, it's not proper. And Allah wanted to put an end to it. So he, the order, he had Sayyidina Zayd was was owned, he was a slave owned by Sayyida Khadija radiallahu anha, and she gave him to the Prophet as a gift. And the Prophet ﷺ, he loved him and he raised him, and then he had him, for a while before prophethood, he was known as Zayd ibn Muhammad. He adopted him and says, he declared that he is my son. And then when he wanted him to get married, his cousin Zainab bint Jahsh radiallahu anha, he wanted to marry them together, and she was kind of like, she is from the elites of Quraysh, and this person used to be a slave. I mean, she did not want to do that, and the Quran came down and says, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. Once Allah and His Prophet decides a matter, no believer has any choice to accept or not to accept. You have to surrender. And we'll come back to this verse. But finally, she agreed to marry Zayd. But the social difference was so big. There were problems in that household. And then finally, it ended up with, they wanted to get divorced. And Allah told His Prophet to marry her. And at the time, marrying the wife of your, the divorced wife of your son was something very big in the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, the Prophet did not want to do it, and he was kind of hesitating, trying to convince Zayd and Zainab to kind of patch things up. And Allah, then He said in verse 37, وَإِذْ تَقُولُ لِلَّذِي أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ زَوْجَكَ وَاتَّقِ اللَّهَ وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَنْ تَخْشَاهُ. So the Quran came down and says, they must get divorced and you must marry her. And Zainab bint Jahsh, she married the Prophet ﷺ, and the whole adoption, the habit of adoption was annihilated just with that act. There was no more adoption, to the Arabs after that point. And that was a very effective method to abrogate adoption. But that was a very difficult test on the Prophet. It was a very difficult test on Zainab, and but they surrendered to Allah, and whatever Allah says, fear me. Don't fear what the people are gonna say. Don't care what the people are gonna say. Care what Allah thinks, what Allah wants you to do, and these are the instructions from Allah, because He says, فلما قضى زيد منها وطرا زوجناكها لكي لا يكون على المؤمنين حرج في أزواج أدعيائهم إذا قضوا منهن وطرا وكان أمر الله مفعولا. Your son is your son. A person that you adopt is not your son. So every person is by bloodline. It's not by title. You may say somebody is my son, but Allah says if he's not from your blood, he's not your son. So that's that practice was abrogated to protect the bloodline and the bloodline and the titles and the names of the family names. Another test was the order for the women to wear hijab. That was in that surah also, in verse 59. And Allah says, يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين وكان الله غفور رحيما. That was the order for the women to cover their faces and their jilbab, so that they would be known as chaste, as honored, and nobody would say anything and hurt them. So that was the hijab was a test for women for their own protection. And the women, a lot of them they submit, and that's a very 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 tough test for women. And a pivotal verse about surrendering to Allah is the one I just mentioned in verse 36 in the beginning. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. For a believer, if you believe in Allah and you believe in the Prophet and you believe in the Quran, when Allah or His Prophet say something that this matter is settled, it's settled. There is no more I think, there is no more, well, there is nothing. Total surrender to Allah and His Prophet is what's required of a believer. There cannot be any, well, I got better option. There is no better option. There are many things that Allah and the Prophet did not say anything about. Fine, work your logic, work your experience, come up with whatever you want. But once Allah and His Prophet clarify a matter, it's done. There is no more arguing. There's only surrender and follow. So that, so a believer surrenders no matter if the order is easy or hard, whether it makes sense to him or not, whether he knows the wisdom behind it or not. You surrender. You don't expect Allah to convince you before you obey Him. Allah is Allah and we are nothing. We cannot treat, we cannot address Allah as if He's an equal. Convince me and I'll obey you. No, you obey Him whether you understand or you don't. Once the matter is clarified, the only option is surrender. And the surah ends with a warning to the ones who will not surrender to Allah. In verse 72, Allah says, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Now Allah created man from a mind and have desires. Because angels don't have desires. They have a mind, but they don't have desires, so they don't sin. Animals have desires, but they don't have a mind, so they're not held responsible. But when Allah gave the trust of believing, you manage your own faith, you manage your own belief, you believe out of your own free will. When Allah gave that amana to the heavens and the earth, to the universe, to everything, who would take it? They said, no, we don't want it, we don't want the responsibility that comes with it, we submit, we don't want any chance to have an option not to submit. But man, he decided to accept it. And the term ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا, unjust and ignorant, not by accepting it. The ظَلُوم and jahul is when you were giving that trust and you squander that trust and you refuse to surrender and you do whatever you want, you're going to pay the consequence. And if you act that way, then you are ظَلُوم and jahul. You are unjust to yourself and ignorant of the punishment that awaits you. So, and the last verse, لِيُعَذِّبَ اللَّهُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ وَالْمُشْرِكَاتِ وَيَتُوبَ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. The ones who submit willingly will have abundance in goodness from Allah. جَنَّةٌ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ. Jannah is, nobody can imagine. You cannot even imagine. Anything that comes to your mind, Jannah is not like that. So when Allah says you have these fruits, it's only by name, because there's no other way to give you that image. But the way it looks, the way it tastes, the way beautiful things are there, you can never have any appreciation. You cannot even think about how beautiful Allah's reward is. And that's why we surrender. We surrender to please Allah so we can enter heaven, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.